Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Two Idiots podcast. I'm Reg.
I'm Randy.
And joining us this week, we have Miss Gloria Froese. I don't know if you actually pronounce it Froese. Maybe I'm 2 minute
yeah,
night.
That's
the phrase. Okay.
yeah.
Welcome here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So basically, the plan today, we're going to be touching on some religious stuff that may or may not step on some toes, and as most religious things do. That's half the fun, I think. But before we begin, I want to touch on your last name a little bit more, because growing up, it was always Froese to me, and all my Mennonite family, everyone is always Froese, and they were very stickler about Mennonite names. They are what they are. And but someone in my school joined, and she went by Froese. And my entire life, I'm like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. So I don't know if you've ever been called that.
I think it's a Southern Manitoba name, because my husband's family is from Grunthal. So there are definitely phrases. But I think the ones from Ontario and British Columbia tend to say Froese.
That checks
maybe
out.
It's a regional thing. I don't know.
Could be. I mean, it's with Grunthal, you never know what you're going to get. So
I've always kind of thought about that too, because there's a couple guys at work that go by Croker, like it's spelled Craker, like we would usually have here, but they go by Croker, and I'm like, is everybody just saying it wrong? Is it actually Craker? And like no one's just corrected them.
It's
Craker. So every time I always wonder, I'm like, oh, maybe it is a regional
just tell them they're
thing.
wrong. All their heritage is wrong.
Something to do with the dialect, because it's the O umlaut that has been turned into OE. So the German O umlaut is more of an Ö.
That makes sense,
right?
So it's kind of cross of that. And I guess maybe the more English societies just made it an O sound. So
we've kind of bastardized most things, but
yeah,
it is funny how that happens. I mean, Randy's is easy; he's a Hayden. You can't mispronounce that.
Mm-hmm.
But Mennonite names are just. Well, actually, the Daily Bonnet had a good article about all the different like Mennonite last names and how to pronounce them, and it was insightful. I enjoyed it. Anyway, that is not what we're going to talk about, but that's what we started with. So basically, to preface this, I became aware of your story, Gloria, through a Mennotoba. I think that's run by Andrew Unger's wife, I believe. Am I right in that?
That is, yeah.
So basically, speaking of Daily Bonnet, former guest, Andrew Unger, basically you did an article or an interview with his wife for the thing, because you left the Church of God Restoration. Is that how it's said? Or do you just say Church of God? Yeah. I don't know how that works.
I think they've been trying to pull away from the Restoration title. They just want to do Church of God, but legally they're registered as Restoration. And in my day, we loved the Restoration title. And I think people are now using it to differentiate them from all the other Churches of God who've also been... The Church of God on Mackenzie Avenue and Steinbeck got in a bit of trouble over this as well, because people assumed it was them. And so, I think everybody's trying to differentiate. And it's like, no, people south of Steinbeck, they're the Restoration group.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, with religion, it's difficult, because especially if the church is with such a common name like Church of God, I mean, you're going to kind of get grouped together, especially here if you don't really know the differences between the sects, which most people don't. They're all, they wear, a duke, they all, they wear their dresses and their aprons and, their their suspenders. They're all this or they're all that. But yeah, so basically you were a part of Church of God Restoration. So let's get into that.
All right.
Yeah, before we begin, I am not religious. Well, I used to be religious, and then I'm not. Whereas Randy has really never been religious. So
I'm kind of the outlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm an atheist, humanist. Yeah, ex-evangelical.
Yeah.
Kind of what I identify as.
I was going to ask I mean, we can get into that after your story, because I was curious how you go, or like kind of what happens to your faith after leaving, like kind of that type of experience.
Yeah, it's a process. Yeah, we can definitely get into that.
For sure.
It was a part of after I left. I was a Christian for probably 9 years after I left, and then began the deconstruction.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. That sounds very familiar. Anyway, so Church of God Restoration, little thing here, according to their Wikipedia, founded in the 1980s by Danny Wilburn Lane. but it's a branch of, an earlier Christian sect, as they all tend to be. One of the things in your Mennotoba article was that basically one of the fractures happened because they were arguing about whether or not to wear ties. Which is super
fascinated
fun.
me reading that.
Their splits are over ridiculous reasons, but that's probably the one that takes the cake. Because they had started in 1880. I think that was when there was a lot of revivals and stuff going on. So they were one of the holiness groups then. And I think they were maybe a little bit liberal to start off with. I'm not even sure exactly. But they became quite conservative. And so the dress of their time was the long dresses. And I think they took the scripture that the adorning be of the heart, not of the outward, and just different scriptures about jewelry and that kind of thing. And so that meant that men weren't supposed to wear neckties. So then it was, I think, 1911, 1912? I remember the exact
something
year.
Like that, 1912.
Yeah. Okay, so then there was a big split over whether or not men could or should wear neckties in church. And so the overwhelming group of them split off and became Church of God, what's now known as Anderson. They're based in Anderson, Indiana. And Bill and Gloria Gaither are from that branch of the Church of God. And then there was a more conservative group, the ones who didn't want to be wearing the necktie. They split off and formed a group called Church of God, Faith and Victory. I think there's several different... Faith and Victory was the name of their publication. And so they are still quite conservatively dressed. They dress probably more like the 1800s. The Church of God Restoration has taken theirs to their own style. But the Church of God Faith and Victory women tend to wear more floral or more print dresses, but it's still a very simple dress. And the men do not wear neckties. So, yeah.
That's so fun. Because, I grew up in the Mennonite Summerfeld Church, which... I think on the spectrum is fairly conservative. But then at one point when I was younger, I don't even know what the impetus was for it, but basically there was an issue within the church, or they were doing something, and my parents decided that, we don't like this. So then I think a group of them left that church, started their own thing in like the Mitchell School gym or whatever. They started their own thing. What was it called? I think it was called like New Hope something. I don't know. So they basically branched off. So we very briefly joined this like fractured sect of like the Summerfeltness, whatever. And it was super fun in that it wasn't at all.
Those don't tend to do very well.
No. I don't suspect that it's still around. We eventually left and went back to the previous Summerfelt, but it's just interesting because there were so many times where it's like, we're going to put it to a vote. Someone wants a guitar in church. So we need to decide whether that's too Vetlich and too worldly for that to be, to accept it, because how could you possibly be worshiping properly if there's a guitar involved? And it's...
Oh, yeah. Those a cappella circles? No.
We would have the 4 old men or the 5 old men up at the front, the Fezingers, and they would be, none of them could sing, and they would all be leading in song, right? It was...
Oh, those songs, I attended some of those services. Singing was horrible.
Yeah. It's terrible. It's just interesting to me that, now, looking back, as a formerly religious guy going, now no longer, but looking back at it, just... when you look at it the bird's eye view, the little like things that they decide to fight over for no reason, it doesn't change the doctrine. It's just your interpretation, and it kind of, I don't know.
Nothing really of importance, but they break up families and friendships. And just the bad blood that runs as a result of that. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
Well, even for me as someone who never was in these circles, right, growing up, I'm listening to it and I'm going like, you really fought over whether to have a guitar in church? Like, how stupid is that?
Drums. Drums is the worst thing ever for some of these churches. Like, that caused massive issues.
Is it because it's like rock and roll and it's the devil's music?
Basically.
Is that why?
Yeah, totally.
Well, they had to fight. They had to fight to even get an organ in ours, or it wasn't even an organ; it was a piano, I guess, or whatever. But even that was like a fight, and it was a real treat.
It really
awful.
Anyway, so you were part of Church of God Restoration. Is there only one of those near us around here? Is that the one south of Steinbach?
Yeah, I think in total, the entire group across the world, I run guesstimates of 1,000 to 1,500 people.
Oh, wow.
So they have a congregation here in Steinbach area. They've got one in Elmer, Ontario. So that's the Henry Hildebrandt kerfluffle that you'll hear about in Ontario. They've got a little group in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I think they've got a work that they started in Kelowna. But that's it for Canada. And then there's a handful in the States, and they've got one in Germany or Austria. Philippines, I think they've got a presence in Africa. Yeah, not that. There's a few. Oh, in Ireland, they've got an outreach. They're trying to get all the nations. They're trying really, really, really hard because the prophecies are saying that the millions are coming. They're coming any minute now, really, from all nations across the world.
We need to get ready. Yeah, prepare. They're coming.
So they're trying really hard. They are. And he's now said in the next few months, so now they're really, really trying.
So you joined when it says you're about 9 years old when you joined. Was your family a part of a different group prior to that, or was this kind of like your jump into religion?
No, I was born in the German Church of God, so Gemeinde Gottes, the church on Mackenzie Avenue.
I lived 2 doors down from that church for 20 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in the parsonage there. I think they've moved it now since they renovated the church, but yeah. So I was actually born in Barhead, Alberta, in their congregation there. My dad was a pastor there, and we moved to Steinbach when I was 4. And so, yeah, my dad was a pastor there until I was 9, I think. And they ended up leaving the church. They got disillusioned with some of the things that had gone down, and so broke off on their own. And then some of the people from the German Church of God in Ontario called them. I think it was in March of 1991. And they sang songs. It was lively a cappella singing, and it sounded really good, apparently. And it was just this perfect, wonderful group of people that was restoring the Church of God to the way it should have been back in the old days, or to the way it was in the old days and the way it should be. And it's on fire, and none of this lukewarmness and compromise and things. That's the kind of lingo that they use.
Oh, yeah.
So, So then they were having a camp meeting in Ohio that May and June. And so our family drove out for that, and that's where we got roped in and joined.
Fun. Fun. Do you? What's your earliest memory of joining that church? I mean, 9 years old. You're old enough to, I guess, absorb what's going on around you.
No, I've got very vivid memories of those days. I remember driving onto the campground and looking around for people, and then I'm seeing all these weird people with long dresses and long sleeves. I thought it was bizarre, but they were really friendly and they were really nice. And then I went to their services, and I don't know if you've watched any of the videos of their services.
No, I haven't.
No.
It's pretty fascinating because when you see these people with this conservative garb, you're expecting like the Sommerfeld type of a service, or like a really subdued. No, they start, they're standing up and raising their hands. They're shouting in between songs or at the sermons. And I grew up in a very quiet state church. So it was very strange to me to have all this kind of display there. And yeah, so I was 9, and I noticed that every service they had an altar call. So people would go down to the front to pray. And in the church I had grown up with, we had those, but it was only for salvation services.
Okay.
So if you wanted to get saved, you would go down.
I'm not sure what that means. What's the difference?
There's a bench at the front of the church. And so if you feel the call of the Spirit and want to go and get saved, you get up and you go and kneel down, and somebody prays with you and you get saved, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Except the Church of God Restoration uses this for everything. So if you felt convicted by anything in the message, you would go down to the front and pray with somebody and get help for whatever.
Sure.
And that morphed into its own little beast. Basically, if you would go through a meeting without going down once, you're not very spiritual because you're not taking things seriously. So my mom started pressuring me to go down, and I pushed back because I had become a Christian when I was in the German Church of God when I was 5, I think. Mm-hmm. And so, no, I didn't see the need for it. And she kept on pushing me. I'm like, I'm not going down there in front of everybody and praying at some bench.
Yeah.
So
it's like a confessional where everyone can see you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Totally. They know you're there, and it depends. And people can, based on what the message was on, they can guess what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
If it's, So I just remember it was weird. I mean, it was decent, and I was bothered that I had to wear dresses and I had to wear long sleeves. I was used to wearing shorts and pants, and that kind of annoyed me. Mm-hmm. So I think, we joined at that point, and then we went to the next meeting in Washington, just south of BC. That July or August. And then the pressure started coming on. So I needed to get saved. And my parents informed me that I actually wasn't a Christian because I was disobedient and I was a kid and I was rebellious. And so I needed to get saved.
Yeah.
And so there was a service where one of the pastors got up and preached at the kids, specifically aimed for the kids probably between 8 and 14. And that was what the message was on. And it was about hellfire and how you're going to burn and die. And it was horrific. He was all kinds of theatrics and crying and wailing stuff. And aiming at the kids.
Yeah. What better influence is there than fear, right?
Yeah. The really positive, totally. The rainbows, the hellfire, the death, the guilt. It really, really helps bring kids into a healthy mindset. It's wonderful.
No doubt.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. I could talk about how screwed up those kids are.
I'm one of them.
I don't want my kids to even ever know that there's such a thing as hell, really. That kind of fear. It's just, it's brutal. Interesting side note with this guy is a few years later, it came out that he was molesting a bunch of young women in the church.
Oh.
So the focus on preaching on kids was a little bit creepy in hindsight.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, as you do.
So,
wow.
So my parents started pressuring me. I should go down, and the altar call went on. So they sing these sad, plaintive songs that are pulling on your emotions. And then the ministers get up there and are crying and wailing for the children to please come down and won't you please come and pray. It's a whole emotional rigmarole. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And I kept on resisting it because, I am a Christian and my parents kept pressuring me. So fine, I finally decided to go down. And I think it was actually the leader of the group who came to pray with me then at that point. Like Daniel Lane. And so I prayed, I said something, and so I got saved. And I think I had an emotional rush, as you will, after that kind of emotional manipulation.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and I'm like, okay, I'm in this. Why not go in for hook, line, and sinker? So the next experience that's expected after salvation is sanctification, where the Holy Spirit burns the root of sin out of your heart. The root of sin that came when Eve took the apple and disobeyed. So that put,
original sin.
Yeah, there we go.
Women, man.
The Holy Spirit burns that out so that you never have a desire to sin again. So from now on, you will live a sin-free life. And so I did that because whatever, that's what you do, and felt some sort of emotional thing again. And then a few days later, I got baptized. So I did the whole trinity of experiences right there.
That's quick. That is quite the turnaround. Yeah. But even man, there's so much there. But how can the people that are doing that not see the fallacy of saying we're going to burn the root out so you'll never feel compelled to sin again, but then judge you for sinning later? So clearly it didn't work. But then they put the onus on you that you didn't do it right?
The onus is totally on you. And to fast forward a bunch of years, I was a teenager struggling with everything. Obviously, I didn't do well with the rules. I didn't do well with the fake expectation or all the expectations on me. I tried really, really hard. But I still was mouthy and I still talked back. And so then finally one of the top ministers approached me and informed me that I had never been sanctified because otherwise I wouldn't be acting like this. So I mean, for me, that was like, well, okay, so did I lose my sanctification? Because if you can't just lose your sanctification, you have to lose a whole package deal.
Yeah.
You have to lose your salvation as well. And I don't think I did that. So, okay, then it must have just been that I never was sanctified. So then they prayed with me and I got sanctified, whatever that meant. And I remember even afterwards, I was in a van with like 15 people traveling. We would travel to these camp meetings. We'd drive 24 hours at a time, barely stopping, just, it was horrible. And I was in a van with a child, with a baby that was crying nonstop. And just the rage was building in me. I'm like, you're sanctified. Prove it. Show you're sanctified. Don't show your anger. You're not angry. You're sanctified. It was a frustrating thing because I'm trying so hard to do the thing I'm supposed to, but I'm still feeling irritation at a baby crying, which you should not be feeling any irritation or any rage or anything once you're sanctified because all that carnal nature is burned out of you.
It's it doesn't, I can understand on some level when a church or a message or whatever is trying to instill some sort of calm and I don't know, holiness and grace and stuff. And so you might experience a situation where you can fall back on these tenets and feel calm, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then it always goes a bit too far and says that if you feel this thing, you're either compelled by the devil, or you're a terrible person, or you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But they're basic human reactions to basic human things.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, no, if you feel that basic human thing, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Especially as a teenager, where like your life is nothing but raw emotions because it's all coming at you at once, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was I remember thinking when I was 14 that this was the worst time ever. I'm actually surprised I didn't get suicidal at that point. But suicide is also sin, and you go to hell, so that's not really that.
Oh yeah, you would
something
never
that could be.
consider it.
No,
Yeah.
but it was just between all the pressures. I was still getting spanked. I got spanked until I was 18. So that was a big part of their thing. Kids, for any transgression, you would get that. And between that, you would also get the emotional castigation, telling you how terrible you are and telling you what your intentions were and that you did this wrong. You don't know your own heart. You don't know your own intentions. They know it, and they know that you meant to do this. You meant to be rebellious. And so between everybody, the ministers, the church, your parents, they wear you down to the ground. Yeah. So it was horrible. Those teenage years were completely awful on all fronts.
So your parents went in whole hog, like when you were 9, when they joined, they went full on, like we're wearing the clothes, we're doing the this, we're doing the that, we're totally committed.
They actually started the congregation in Steinbach. They were the pastors. For the
first.
Yeah.
One of the founding members. Look at you.
Look at that.
Wow. Yeah. Such a point of pride.
We've got some celebrities in here now. But that's even heavier as the daughter of the founder of the chapter.
Yeah. It was the pressure is intense on pastors' kids there. Everybody. Yeah. So it's people would never come to me with their complaints. They would go to my parents with their complaints and complain about how I talked too much. I was too something. I'm a very outgoing person, and I'm just a lot, and I talk a lot, and my daughter's a lot like me, so I kind of understand how people are frustrated. But they would just make it a big thing that I was just a terrible child. They couldn't control me, and so they would go to my parents and complain, and my parents would sit on it until I did something that triggered their rage one too many times, and then that turned into an hours-long session of beating me up emotionally and physically, and
right.
The pressure is intense. And just when I talk to young people even now, I think it's even worse in a lot of ways. There's less of the corporal punishment. They don't do as much of the beating, but the emotional weight is even worse. Just being suppressed and beaten down.
Nail on the head when you basically said they couldn't control you. It's about basic control.
Yeah,
absolutely. Breaking you. Yeah. And they really did try to break me. And I think they got close. By the time I was 18, I was probably a shell of what I would have been otherwise. But there was still that little bit of me that wouldn't quite. And so when I got that opportunity to break away, that's like, all right, nobody's controlling me ever again, no matter what.
Sometimes that's how it works, right? You almost need to get, they in some perverse way they made you are now, which might be good in some way, like to know kind of who you are and have to work through that type of abuse, which I don't wish on anybody, but you can look back on it at least now and say that, maybe some of those steps ended up making you who you are, even though
it's like if they take you down to the bottom of the well, you got nowhere to go but up, right? So
exactly. To fight back. And it showed me, I think, how much strength and resilience I do have, and that I was able to fight back the way I was. But it's horrific. And I see a lot of kids that they just break completely. People that just can't make their way through life afterwards. It's pretty horrible.
Excuse me. So basically the church right now, what's the general style? So basically you show up, because me growing up, they would have all the adults would be part of the service, and then the kids would go to Sunday school, and then sometimes the kids would join the main message, but most times not. And then once you age out of Sunday school, how old would I have been? 16-ish, 15 maybe, I don't know, somewhere around there. Then you would have to sit with the adults and fall asleep like the rest. Is it similar to that? Also, how many people would you say are in the church just in Steinbach?
In Steinbach, I think maybe 150 to 2 from what I remember. And so I haven't been at a service for many, many years, but I think the general style is they still have Sunday school for the kids. And I think it's because they have everybody in the main service. So I think there might be like a Sunday school component for the adults as well. And so the kids go off and get their own thing. And then the kids rejoin the service. So I don't know if you saw the video a few weeks ago of when they held a service in contravention to the laws. And they had the children up there singing a song. So that would generally be the kids come back from Sunday school and then they sing a song to the rest of the congregation and maybe just say something or do something. And then they go and sit with their parents and sit for the rest of the full service. So the singing, except it's really hard to fall asleep there with all the singing and the yelling unless you get used to it, I guess. You should listen to or watch one of their services sometime. They have a lot of them on YouTube now. It's really fascinating. Like
I'll have to.
Yeah.
They probably have more subscribers than we do.
Well, no. They're trying to get the multitudes. People aren't really going for it.
Yeah.
But
so
yeah,
basically,
sorry.
They're changing their messaging to be more of like a evangelical type. Everybody come here, but they're not willing. But from what I understand, they're not really changing sort of the basic, like the dress and the daily stuff, but they're still trying to convince people to show up somewhere.
Right, like they're updating their personalities, but not their outer, the outer shell.
Not even entirely. They've always been evangelical. It's always been a matter because the message of the core Church of God was that people are coming out from all of Babylon into the true Church of God. And so they've kept this up, and this has been the message for 30 years, and they've been sure that people will be coming in any minute now, like all of God's people, all the saved ones. Once they see the church, they will come flowing in. They will understand that this is the one true church. And so they've just I think there's minor changes of personality, but not much. Like if they've done a lot of street meetings in Steinbeck, they try to do a lot of that outreach to get to people. And I think it's part of their fantasy that if people only know that they exist, then they will feel this strike in their spirit and know that this is the Church of God and they need to go. That's really
there's something romantic of that, right? Because even now, politically and just life in general, everybody's always like, "Oh, we need to go back to the simpler times, back when it was
nostalgic,
good, back when it was better." And it's like all these types of churches do the same thing. Growing up, I heard so many times where it's like, these new churches with their lady preachers and they're this and they're that, and they're too progressive and they're all this and whatever. But it would always harken back when it was like this, when we would only do that, things were better. And it's
when women were submissive to their husbands.
I have a good story for that. We went to a Mennonite wedding, a friend of mine's, at actually the church I grew up in. And my wife, who grew up in no way religious in any way, her dad is Buddhist, her mom's sort of irreligious, and there was no like regular church knowledge. So anyway, we were dating at the time. We went to this wedding, and they're reading through many of the scriptures or whatever, the verses that touch on kind of women being obedient, and as a wife you must stand behind your husband and be silent and blah 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 blah. And she looks at me and she's just like, "Excuse me." And it's
horrifying.
It is. It really is. But anyway,
it's and all these things that they've been doing, like going to the Black Lives Matters marches. It seems so out of step with now doing the anti-lockdown thing, like opposite ends of the cause. But it's all about attention. It's because they had in Minneapolis when they had the first march when George Floyd got killed. They had a group of them there standing there and singing during the march, and so they went viral as Amish. And so I think they're like, "Whoa, this is our first exposure," and this is where people start coming in. Because they've been amping the people up. One of the preachers told them that we're going to need to build a massive call center to hold all these people to answer calls, because the calls are just going to be coming in like nothing else with people interested in this. So I think they're facing a lot of frustration now because they're getting all this exposure. They're in the news. The news is not being kind to them. With the one CTV article that came out a few weeks ago, the reporter tried to talk to Tobias Teese, and he's like, "Nope, not talking to you guys. I'm not. The mainstream media has been very unfair to us and very biased against us, so we're not talking." I think they're realizing that the exposure isn't as positive as they thought it was going to be, and it's not giving the results.
Typical. That is so typical. Like, it just, the mainstream media, whatever that means, is against us, which means they're colluding against us instead of just reporting that you're being dickheads. But
but that's not possible.
That's what you're doing. That's what you're being. They're not
exactly. They're just calling it for what it is. Well, I
Yeah.
watched a video clip that Tobias Thiessen had posted on his Facebook of, I guess, somebody from Mennotoba Health had been driving by the church a few Sundays ago just to kind of monitor what was going on. And so he and another guy stopped them, and they were just, "You don't have permission to be here, and why are you singling us out, and why are you doing this? You're targeting us." And then at the end, he's like, "I want you to realize that if you give us a ticket, you are giving this ticket directly to God. You are fighting against his church, and I want you to take that very seriously and think about that very seriously." And I'm like, how did that guy not just burst out laughing? But they really think that they hold the weight of God, that they hold this conviction that people will feel struck by the Spirit for fighting against God's church. Because if you fight against God's church, you'll never win, because they will always win.
Yeah.
So that they still think that God is going to pull some big coup and save them and show everybody how right they are. It's, yeah.
Well, maybe. It's just a matter of days, right? It's going to happen.
Sure.
Yeah. You're giving a ticket to God, man. He's
So
really good for it.
Probably, you would think so. You just make money up, right?
Well,
Yeah.
Make it wine or something.
Just some bread, right? Just like, I'm just gonna money.
They're racking up those. They don't think those tickets are going to stick. They really don't think they're going to pay them. They think that they're going to be able to fight it on constitutional grounds or something.
Well, I don't think they have any ground to stand on personally, but
no,
I'm
they
not
don't.
a lawyer.
Well, they got their, what was it, the Center for Justice or whatever. I think those lawyers are telling them that they're on the right, but I think they're starting to realize more and more that no, these are actually not going to go away. Yeah.
Awesome. So you break out. At what point do you decide? I guess you're about 18. It says you decided to leave. At what point did you finally go, okay, I'm out of here? Was there a specific event, or was it just kind of like a buildup of everything? And then what was, that maybe week or two like, where you've decided, Kate, now you're gone. What's life like post breakup?
That's so. Yeah, there was a split that happened in 2000, and I actually just wrote a thing about that recently. But yeah, we were always told this is God's church. This is the unbreakable church. We are his bride. Nothing will ever come between us. And so I guess a few of the ministers called a meeting of the ordained ministers, and they were upset at some of the man rule of how Daniel Lane was controlling everybody. And so they were trying to deal with that, and things weren't getting dealt with satisfactorily. So 3 of them walked out of that meeting and went home, never to come back again. And so for everybody else, my parents weren't ordained, so they were just hearing these things on the side. But they were going to have some mediators work through it. They were going to deal with this. They were going to bring these brothers back in the fold. It was all going to be good. Just pray. God will bring his church back. Like this, a split cannot happen. It just can't. And so I'm hearing this, and it's scaring me, but I'm still believing that, yes, it's God's unbreakable church, so we'll be fine. And there was some tension in the service on Wednesday that week, but the messaging was still just pray. The next day, I was working at Sobeys in Steinbach, and I came out of the parking lot after my 10 o'clock shift. Came out to my car, and there was a car that was standing beside mine with the lights on and was still running. And it was 2 of the women from the church, and they were there to tell me that my dad had once testified that if he ever left the church, he wanted his family to stay. Well, and now he is leaving, so they want me to take what he said seriously and stay with the church. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's not leaving. He's just not taking sides. We're waiting to see what will happen. They're like, no, you need to stay with the church. You need to. You need. And I was one of the up and coming young people. I was one of the leaders' pets at that point. So I think I was somebody they really wanted to keep. And so I went home feeling sick. And the next Sunday, it basically erupted. If you see them, they're always very polite and very civil to everybody, and they're nice to each other. But there's so much anger and hate and resentment that's always brewing. And that Sunday, everything broke, and people were yelling at my parents and accusing them of things. And I don't even remember what all they said, but it was horrific. Yelling at top of lungs, just so much anger. And I just sat there crying because my whole world is falling apart and I don't know what's going on. And there was a boy that I had fancied myself in love with at that point. We had can't date. You can't do anything of the sort. You can't even have feelings until God tells you who you're going to marry. But I had been cruel to him because I was trying to tamp down my feelings. And so I had apologized at that point for being cruel. And so I think we were kind of back on the mend. And then I remember going out to the back, and he then started yelling at my dad about something, and he was just being hostile. And I interrupted, and I'm like, "Brother so-and-so, is this because of what I've done?" And his voice softened, and he's like, no, this has nothing to do with you. This is just between me and your dad. So yeah, it was just so much hostility. Everything broke apart. And then the next day, the little schoolhouse was on our yard, and people came and started getting all their books and their stuff out, basically signaling that my family was out. And a little later on that week, I think it was actually the Saturday, they brought a bunch of people from Ontario, from Ohio, from different places to do damage control, essentially. And because at that point we were still in possession of the chapel out south of Steinbach, they held a meeting in the Steinbach Arts Council. And so my mom and I and another woman who was also leaving and her daughter, we all went to that service. And they tried to get me to come and sit with them up front, and I didn't feel comfortable with it at that point. And so what had happened on the Sunday before is that I noticed all these people telling lies and showing hatred and showing anger, all things that sin-free people aren't supposed to do. And so for me, it's like, well, why? How is this possible? I haven't sinned. They have sinned, but they're on the inside and I'm on the outside. How does this make any sense? Oh, and backing up a little bit. So that Saturday, I had been working at the deli again, and I had parked my car elsewhere so that they couldn't ambush my car. And I came close to the end of my shift and saw that a bunch of my friends from different places were standing outside of the deli waiting for me. And there was no other way out. So I had to see them when I came out. And they whisked me away off to the Red Pit, which was still at the Clear Spring Mall at the time. And
yeah, the old hole in the floor there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had a minister sitting there waiting for me as well. And so they tried working on me. And I brought this up. I'm like, these people, they sinned. They told lies. They were angry. Like, what is the deal here? Why? But the messaging was still that I was on the outside. And I remember the minister telling me that he said, I've been on the outside. I know what it's like out there. You will never find happiness. You will never find love. It's cruel. It's horrible out there in the world. The only place where you're going to be happy is in the Church of God. The saints are the only ones that will love you the way, that kind of thing. So trying to scare me, but I'm like, but the sinning, how does this work?
You're asking too many questions.
I know. And if it hadn't been for that, I would have gone back because I so badly wanted the comfort, but it was just that cognitive dissonance was too much for me to wrap my head around. And so then I went to the service that evening, and the sermon was about the children of Korah, how they spoke up against Moses, and then the earth swallowed them up, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it's like, if you are speaking against Brother Lane, God's prophet, God's anointed, you will be swallowed up by the earth. So that was aimed at us. Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah. And so again, I'm only 18 at the time, and looking back, I can't believe that they treated me the way they did. I walked out of the Steinbach Arts Council. Suddenly, I was surrounded by about 40 women that just kind of pinned me against the door.
Just Handmaid's Tale going on here.
I haven't actually watched that. I haven't let myself be triggered by that yet.
Yeah, it'll be triggering for sure.
Yeah, I think I've avoided that one so far. But yeah, so they pinned me and the other girl against the door, but she was a shy, quiet one. So I was the one that they were mostly addressing. And so some of these women who had been doing the lying and had been awful, they spoke up and they're like, so-and-so told us this. And yes, we did. We're sorry. We shouldn't have. And I'm like, but again, why am I on the outside? Why are they on the inside?
Yeah.
And then another one started speaking up and telling me of how things would be wonderful if I came back, and it would be like I'd never left, and they would love me and accept me back, and that kind of thing. And I was so tired. I was so sore, so bruised at that point. I wanted nothing but to come back and to have life be normal. So I tried to open my mouth to say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And she kept talking. I'm like, I can get back to them tomorrow. No big rush on this one.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking I wanted to talk to the leader of the group. If he could explain to me what was going on, then it would be okay. And he was too busy with others. And so he never actually did have a chance to talk to me, and never-endingly grateful that he didn't.
It worked out.
It did. So yeah, the other woman that I had driven with, because I remember wanting to get out, just wanting to say, well, I should probably go. Well, it's probably time to go. But I also knew that the instant I said that, they would say, no, that's fine. We'll drive you home after this is done. So then I'd be really and truly trapped. So eventually that woman came to the outside of the crowd and looked at me, and she's like, are you ready to go? And I'm like, yeah. And the crowd parted to let me through, and they were all staring at me. And again, the boy that I had a thing for, he would always stare at me during or after services. That was his thing, just stand there staring. And so I remember he was
classic religious flirtation.
Yeah, pretty much. Religious boys are the worst.
Kind of just subtly, just stretching his suspenders, just watching you,
staring a hole through your soul.
There we go. Oh, my word. It's funny now to look back on, but yeah. So he was standing basically across from me on the wall on the other end from me, staring at me. And I remember seeing that and thinking, well, look well, boy, this is your last chance. So I think I knew this was it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the crowd parted, and so I was shaking with the adrenaline and wanted to get down the stairs, and there was young men lining both sides of the banisters staring at me, and I'm like, great. So I had to walk down those stairs as steadily as I could, and then I just remember going outside. The cold air hit me, and I knew that was it. It was over, and wow. I was more in a state of shock. I didn't know what life would be. I was still telling myself, well, we are the true church. We have now broken away from the false church, as these places will do.
Right.
But it was still the shock of all my hopes of marriage, all my hopes of godly young men. All my friends are gone. Everything is gone. And now I'm being thrown into a cold, cruel world. And am I actually going to find happiness out here? I had no idea. So the next few weeks to months were horrible. I did a lot of crying. I remember just being in my car and listening to music and just sobbing. I think I probably had a nervous breakdown in there somewhere. I must have.
Mm-hmm. Understandably so.
Yeah, it was for that level of pressure and trauma on an 18-year-old. And another thing that they do when somebody leaves, they don't just let you go quietly into the night. They harass you and they bother you. And so they would be cruel to me if they ran into me. One person came to my office where I was working and told me what a horrible person I was, and it yelled at me, basically. And I had a panic attack and ended up going to the back and just sobbing. Yeah. I couldn't stop. And I think there was a lot of PTSD at that time as well.
Yeah. Right.
And others would just walk by the office just staring at me. It's just a lot of harassment and stalking and intimidation that they do. They try to break people.
Very emotionally.
But God's all about loving your neighbors and stuff, isn't he? So
tough love.
Oh, tough love. Okay.
Yeah, this is how you get them back. You pray, you bind their souls, give them to the devil, and you pray that God will destroy their lives so that they will come back to the true church of God. That's the way so I have been bound to Satan. They wish only the worst for me. And there is no real, but that's their version of love, that I will be so miserable that I come back.
Right.
Yeah. So your schooling and everything was also done, like you didn't go to like a public school or anything?
No.
Okay.
I was homeschooled for the first few years and then community or co-op school. So it was all CLE, ABECA, ACE, really bad homeschooling curriculum. I say education very loosely. Yeah. And so, I was over a period, I think it was about a year later that I applied to Providence College. And thankfully, Providence takes homeschooled kids, because otherwise I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else with that diploma that I had. But so we kind of dabbled in conservative churches probably for the next year or so, trying to find a home, something that felt comfortable. And then there was a group called Charity Christian Fellowship, which came and scooped up a bunch of Hutterites in 2001, I think it was. Okay. They were the Church of God Restoration of Mennonites. Basically, they were the better, purer version. And so we got involved with them. And I remember going to their 10 meeting out in Oakville and going to a baptismal service and just the messaging. And I'm like, this is all the same. It's all the same crap. And I'm done with it. I just don't want anything to do with it anymore. So I finally had it. And so the next day, I decided I was going worldly. So I went to a clothing store in Steinbach and bought 2 dresses with long sleeves and slits on the side. And
look at you, hey?
You might almost get a sunburn with that.
I felt so deliciously worldly.
Oh my.
And then I started going church shopping, and I went to different churches in Steinbach. And I didn't want people to influence my decision at all. So I would sneak in a few minutes after the service started. And then as soon as the last word was said, I was out the door like an arrow. And so I did that for a few weeks. And then I ended up finding my home at the EEFC in Steinbach. I liked their choir. I liked the feel. It was a very calming feel after all the crazy. That was a very welcome thing. So I still did the darting in and out. Nobody could catch me until somebody else who knew me from when I was a kid caught me on one of those, and she ran after me and plugged me into the church community, and so got me involved with people there. And so, yeah, they were kind of my refuge, my shelter for the next few years. And it was through them that I got exposed to Providence College and ended up enrolling and going. And I was just going to go for a year to do that. Ended up getting my bachelor's in fine arts there. And that's where the deconstruction began. That's where I started asking questions. I started deconstructing the religion I had been in and really exploring what I felt what God was. And I remember feeling like I was asking too many questions, and if I asked a few more questions, I was going to be the point of no return.
That is perfectly accurate, especially for me. I mean, before we get to that, but when you're discussing your situation and leaving and just how cult-like it is, and basically it's like the epitome of a toxic relationship that you remove all the supports, and then the only thing that you know to rely on is the institution that they're force feeding you into, right? So it's
absolutely, yeah. Nobody will ever love you.
Catholic method. Yeah. So basically, once you leave, or if you leave, and all of your community supports are a part of that, so then you literally don't have anybody, and that's why they keep you there, and it's somehow meant to be a good thing.
They frame it, but I've had arguments with somebody there. I'm like, but then if you ever leave, you are so screwed. And it's like, yeah, well, but that's how it's built. You are supposed to be screwed if you leave, that you'll only ever find happiness if you go back.
Yep.
But I was also lucky in that I had family that were not in the church, extended family. And I was also very open to talk. So I would talk to my coworkers. And I think the first few weeks or months, I was kind of just immersed in shame and horror of what had happened and didn't know who to talk to. But people were really wonderful in how they reached out to me and how they let me talk and just supported me. And I got involved with the music world in Steinbach, and that was a huge source of support. So for me, it was a lot of the community, how they... And yeah, I often talk about the M. Night Shyamalan, whatever, his movie, The Village. And when Ivy gets past the wall and runs into the park warden, she hears his voice and she says, "There is kindness in your voice. I did not expect that." And that's kind of the pinnacle of the movie for me.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. You don't expect to see kindness. You don't expect to see love. You've been told you'll find nothing. You will never make friends. You'll never find love. You'll never be supported again. And then you find out that the monsters are actually inside, that the people on the outside are the wonderful ones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're both on both sides, but
there are, but
I get what you
the concentration of monsters is more. There are more.
Yeah.
There are more kind, compassionate people on the outside than there are inside, and it's not what you're led to expect.
Exactly. Which, I mean, if you're inundated with community and other people, then you have a broader perspective of how to treat people. But if you're in this insular, situation, you're gonna just know what you.
Yeah, they want to keep your world small, just so you don't know.
Yeah.
Speaking of small worlds, how do you? So, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that Church of God Restoration is a cult because it total control, removes all your connections, your life, asks everything of you, blah 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 blah. But what does a cult mean to you, and how does it differ from religion in general, from your perspective?
Isn't all of religion a cult of some sort, really?
Exactly. That's what I'm implying. But
I mean, yeah. So it's a very... I see the Church of God Restoration as religion taken to its far logical conclusion, because most decent Christians are going to not follow all these things because they're cruel or lack compassion or that kind of thing. So they will work ways around to make their faith more compassionate or more workable with the world. The Church of God Restoration shows what happens when you take to the Bible to its complete logical conclusion and take all these beliefs there.
Yeah.
So it's really a very...
There's a good book you should read then on that topic by what's his name? But basically it's A Year of Living Biblically, I think it's called.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's great. He actually spends the whole year, and he, to the best that he can, he follows everything through the Bible to do it as close as he can. Obviously, some of it doesn't make any sense and you can't do it, but he did his very best to follow it. Like, he didn't shave for a year, and then he did all this other stuff, and he's actually Jewish anyway, so I guess some of that he kind of already had through the Torah and whatever else. But then so he basically spends the whole year and he kind of documents it in his book and kind of his end findings. Or it's an interesting book. Anyway, it's similar to that you if you take it all the way to its illogical end,
Yeah, there we go.
it starts becoming nonsense with anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you take everything to their extreme, it doesn't make sense anymore.
For sure.
You don't use nuance or that kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, with them, you see there is no nuance. They just buy into the craziest of it all. And then
I don't get it, because again, I grew up in a way that very often my dad would kind of flip-flop. He would go from super conservative, suddenly he's shaving every day, like it's a sin to not be clean shaven or whatever.
What?
And then he would have I don't know. Something they would all be clean shaven. And then for a while he would grow a goatee because it was like it's like he would suddenly loosen, but then he would talk to someone within the church that would kind of flip it back. So then we would, suddenly we would be allowed to watch certain shows, and then all of a sudden be like, no TV, that is not right. Blah blah.
Right.
Blah. Just nonsense like that, or it'd be like, you're not allowed to wear shorts on Sunday, and I would tell him why, and he'd be like, well, it's disrespectful. And I'm like, to who? Doesn't make any sense.
You ask too many questions.
Don't think, man. Don't think.
And it didn't make any sense, and it still doesn't. And that was a brief phase, but I just told him, I was like, if I'm a believing Christian, if I believe, Jesus is my savior and I'm God-fearing person, I should be able to worship naked on any day I want, and the message should go to where it needs to go. Whether or not I'm wearing shorts or not should be irrelevant. That was my thinking. That's not the right thinking, apparently. And that seems to be more the new age, because now when you go to most churches, there's people with tattoos, and there's wide range of dress, and there's it's a lot more loose. It's weird to me that when a certain sect can be so anal on like their interpretation, as though it's the only interpretation, and then they refuse to read it any other way and just don't ask questions. It's so problematic and toxic, and
right.
And they've taken it to the far extreme of that now. Back in my day, we could still have some of our own say and could still ask questions. I mean, questions weren't frowned on, but now it's the stuff the leader is saying on the pulpit is outright. You cannot ask questions. You cannot challenge me. I can make any changes or decisions that I want to make, but don't you dare think that you can try to say anything to me. What I say comes from God. You shut up and just take it. And
and even so, like, if God is all knowing and the Bible has all the answers in it, why can't they answer any of these questions that you have? Right. Like, that's, to me, that's where that questioning mindset would start. Cause it's like, well, if the book has everything in it, how can you not answer my question?
Exactly. Well, and that was when I started deconstructing. That was kind of my mantra. I'm like, well, if God and the Bible and Christianity are what they claim to be and as true and infallible as they are, I should be able to throw any question at them and they should be able to take it. Like, that shouldn't be a problem. And that's what it is.
That doesn't hold up.
No,
in my opinion.
No, it crumbles. So, I mean, that's what led to me deconstructing and becoming an atheist. But still, I think if something is the truth, it needs to be able to stand up to any questions you can throw at it. And if it's not, why are you believing it?
I always say the same thing. If you have an opinion that you can't defend, then you shouldn't have that opinion.
Exactly.
Not necessarily that opinion is wrong, but either you need to have a better understanding of your own stance, or don't hold that stance. Like, it's fine to say, I don't know, and I'm willing to learn. But if you're going to adamantly say that, gay people shouldn't get married because there's 3 lines in the Bible that might half-ass support it, but if you can't then support why those things are said how they're said, or just in general, then you shouldn't hold that stance. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But once you start picking at that way, then a lot of things start falling apart. And that's scary.
Oh, for sure. I remember asking my Sunday school teacher, because I was the kid that I was there because I had to be, not necessarily that I wanted to be, but there was a time growing up that I was definitely Christian. I believed it. I had all the guilt associated with it. I would, feel bad about things that I was doing or saying, and I would pray every day, all that type of stuff. But as I got older, I would ask questions of my Sunday school teachers, and frankly, teachers is probably a generous term, because they were basically just someone's dad or mom that's looking after kids during church, right? Like they're not
Telling Bible
theologians.
stories.
They're not typically. Yeah, exactly. So basically I remember asking one time, I was like, how do we know that ours is right? Like, how do we know that our church is doing it and everybody else is wrong? How do we know that? And essentially the answer boiled down to faith. I'm like, well,
seems like that's what it always
how do
comes
we
back to.
know?
You just got to believe.
Yeah. Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
God said so. The Bible says so. Well, I questioned somebody on the whole concept of the multitudes. I'm like, so in what concept of any plane of reality do you think that the concept of multitudes coming to join you is realistic? And they replied, well, scripture. I'm like, yeah, but scripture says a lot of things that don't really happen. So, but that's what, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so then you leave this church. Well, I don't know if we should get into more of kind of your experiences there, but I think we get the gist that it was very restrictive. It was very emotionally traumatic, and physically traumatic. Definitely, at least within the home. I mean, I guess you were mostly reprimanded from your personal family.
That or some of the ministers
but
would
it's
also.
not as though. Oh, they would come give you a smack or what?
Not smack, but emotionally they would wear you down. I still like if I've had bosses that call me into their office and say they want to talk, my blood still runs cold. Just because the need to talk is always a traumatic. You are a shitty, horrible human being. You did this wrong, you terrible person. How could you have done this? So yeah, it's one of those things that just sticks. Just somebody saying they want to talk is just a terrifying concept. Another thing
that type of thing that gives religion a bad name, because I'm not religious. I'm an atheist or an agnostic or whatever term you want to stick to me. But I can see the value that being a part of a community and having a communal belief, I can see the value of that. And if you're using that community to do positive things, that sounds great. And if you want to believe all of the things, that's also great. But when there's sects of it, or when parts of it can be used so abusively, I don't know. You can't
when it becomes detrimental to a person, that's when the switch kind of flips.
Yeah, for sure. If it adds beauty and positivity to your life and to those around you, go for it, sure. But yeah, when you start hurting people in the name of it, then that's a problem. Or hurting yourself even.
Oh, for sure.
And another thing Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Another thing I didn't touch on much, but it's the way that they treat relationships. Basically, you're not allowed to have crushes on each other because those are sinful feelings. God is going to lead you to your partner. God will decide when that is. So you just work on becoming spiritual, but don't you dare have crushes or feelings for anybody. So I had so much guilt over having crushes for on boys. I would pray so hard that God would remove my feelings. And I think I ended up hurting several of them because I was trying so hard just to squash my feelings under that. When they showed interest in me, I would try to push them away. And at the same time, I really did enjoy the intention. And it's brutal. And there's a lot of weird things that go on there. A lot of incest, a lot of really inappropriate sexual things that happen that are kept underground. But it's because they repress these hormones so badly. And so then what happens is God will lead you to your spouse, aka a boy comes and asks for the girl's hand, or the ministers say that you would be a good couple, so I think you should get married. And so they don't actually get to know each other. Apparently you get to have 1 30-minute conversation a week over the period of your engagement, which is probably 3 to 6 months. You don't get to touch. You don't get to do anything. I think you might have one escorted lunch or one escorted meal together where chaperones are sitting a few tables over, so you are together at the restaurant. That's the extent of it.
Wow.
And how old would they normally be?
They used to do more in the 18, 19. Now they're waiting until people are in their 20s. But it's still, And also, sex education is not a thing. In some congregations, they will apparently glue the biological reproduction sections together so you don't even learn about that. So the young people have zero clue what sex is.
Wow.
I was worried when you said glue. I thought you were going to say they glued something else. And I was like, whoa.
They just glue all the holes shut. That's what happens. This episode of the Two Idiots Podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Fellas, we're in a thick of winter and the storms are brewing. Looks like 1 to 3 inches are in the forecast when you trim that hibernation bush that's taking place in your pants. Luckily, our partners at Manscaped specialize in products to make sure you're walking around town with beautiful snowballs.
Frosty the Snowman Beautiful. Manscaped is here to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience, offering precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Randy, when did you last shave them winter balls?
I was shaved about 3 weeks ago. What, a fortnight or so?
A fortnight isn't that 20 days, isn't it?
Something like that, I think so. 4 years ago. But yeah, because I had the Lawnmower 3.0, it did a phenomenal job. No nicks, no cuts. And with that in mind, the Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer is the best hygiene tool for the modern man. Because of the ceramic blade and advanced skin-safe technology, your snags on your snowballs will be reduced. The trimmer is also waterproof, so you can trim in the shower or a jacuzzi if you're a savage.
If you're a savage, yeah. If you're trimming your nuts in a jacuzzi, especially if it's not your jacuzzi, then you are definitely a savage.
That's alpha male shit right there.
Yeah, and especially if other people are in the jacuzzi. Anyway, Manscaped's Performance Package is the best buy of 2021. The Performance Package comes with the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, which we all need as we get older, Performance Boxer Briefs, and a travel bag.
Bonus. Have you ever noticed how nasty nose and ear hair is? In fact, 79% of partners polled admitted that long nose hair is a major turnoff. I deal with long nose hair myself. It is a pain in the arse, but if you get yourself the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer, you can deal with that. And you might as well use the best tools to do the job.
Indeed. This bundle also comes with the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and Crop Reviver Ball Toner. The Crop Preserver is anti-chafing ball deodorant that will make your balls smell nice and make you feel like your testes are walking in a winter wonderland.
Oh God, doesn't that sound good? Now, the Crop Reviver is a spray-on toner for your balls, and it's made with soothing aloe and witch hazel extracts that will make your balls look up at you and say, "Thanks. You're my friend."
Thank you, Randy. You treat me so nice. Don't get cold feet this winter. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code IDIOTS at manscaped.com.
They also have a ton of other amazing men's hygiene products on their website, from disposable mats for your pubes to foot deodorant. Now remember, that's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code IDIOTS. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code IDIOTS, IDIOTS. Thanks, Manscaped, for making our winter wieners look so good.
Winter wieners, I love that. Yeah, so let's make your balls look up at you and say, "Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guy."
Hey, guy. So definitely check out Manscaped, 20% off, free shipping. Idiots, code IDIOTS, to say thank you.
Do it.
Might be less traumatic than what actually, because I actually heard of one girl, and I've heard of several. So when the girls get engaged, there's usually a lot of tears. They cry themselves sick with fear and terror, because you're marrying basically a stranger. You know him through church services, but you weren't really allowed to talk to him or get to know him. And apparently one girl said that she was so upset that she was being told that she has to have sex on her wedding night, because it basically feels like rape, because you're going from 0 to 100 with a stranger.
For sure.
And so, yeah, these girls are terrified. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, neither of them know what's going on, really. You don't have any idea. I've heard that like a few days before the wedding, some older ministers or whatever will sit you down and explain how the birds and the bees work. And then good luck going with them.
just a crash course.
Out of the Then you look away from each other and just
I mean, I can't, because I think of my dating and engagement and all that. I got to pick who I wanted. We got to know each other, and you just don't go from 0 to 100. There's all those steps in between. So that once you get to your wedding night,
it's so important.
It makes all the difference.
I still don't understand.
Yeah, like Steinbach is the place where teenagers get married so that they can have sex because they are not allowed to do anything until then. That's what everybody knows. That's what
Yeah.
you do.
Oh yeah.
But it's just how can you have a functional marriage? Well, the problem is that especially in these Church of God Restoration type churches, the goal isn't to have a fun, healthy relationship. It's to be together, go to church, have babies. That's all it's for. And you're
your
not supposed to enjoy
criteria
it.
is you wanted a spiritual man. And I remember that. Like I wanted a spiritual young man. And I remember going out in the world and none of these young men were as godly and as spiritual. So I was like, no, fine.
Yeah. And it's just but when you go into it looking at it from that perspective, then it's, of course, you don't care if these people are being traumatized by being forced together or if they're even happy. If they can have a brood of babies that can then join your church, then it's all working out. And that's perfect.
And their marriage is happy because it has to be, because you have no options. You can't split up. So figure it out.
Can't split up. The wife can't talk back or else she gets shit.
Nobody can talk back. Like there is still the power structure. So in the church, women have equality as ministers, but in the home, the wife is still subject to the husband.
Yeah.
Unless the husband is doing something that is against the church, and then the wife has rights outside of that. But yeah. The church is the ultimate authority.
Yeah. Luckily, the church I grew up in wasn't nearly that bad. Like people were dating, and it was still very common that they'd be really young when they got married, and because no one was doing anything. But in the same thing, we didn't have any sex education. It was I didn't learn anything about anything that I didn't teach myself. And then again, to touch on kind of even relationships and sexual stuff, the guilt of masturbation growing up in those types of things is just so heavy. You're
cheating on your future spouse. How dare you?
Yeah. You're wasting your seed. Well, actually, that's why back in the Dizay, apparently in Jewish synagogues, you would bring your son to this place, and your son would then have sex with the drawing a blank on the name, not the priestesses, the ladies that are there, but they're holy women. You would have sex with them, but it's not sex because it was a sin to spill your seed on the ground. So you would be able to spill it somewhere else.
That's some fun interpretation there.
Oh my word! Interesting.
And I don't know if that's apocryphal or if it's true, but I've definitely heard that story a couple of times.
That's brutal.
Regardless, there's definitely that weight. Again, as a teenage boy.
How were you not?
Yeah, see, like from my perspective, right, I never had a religion, so it's like me, I hit 12, 13. It was like, let's just go, right? Like, this is awesome. So, like, for me to think about having to do that and then be like, oh, shit, I'm going to hell.
Oh, you would feel so dirty and so awful. You sinned by doing that. And actually, in the Church of God Restoration, the pastors will make you be accountable to them. I've heard this from some of the boys, that you have to report how many times this week you masturbated and who were you thinking about when you did it.
My God.
And I think, well, one of the guys I talked to said he would do it for a while. And he's like, why am I confessing all this?
Yeah. Wow. Like, trying to put those together. Like, that's so much trauma and so much like connecting.
So invasive.
Connecting sex to guilt.
Yeah.
It's, oh my God.
Well, and how do you turn that off? You get married, and now suddenly sex is supposed to be amazing. You pull it along that is horrible. There's so many dysfunctional marriages. It's even in evangelicalism and other branches of Christianity, so much of the guilt over masturbation and sex. You can't, there's still so much guilt when you're then having it with your partner, so you can't really have a healthy sex life.
For sure.
No, absolutely not. But again, that's not the goal. The goal is to just have sex for procreation. And if you don't even touch each other for the rest of the year, that's fine.
No, except that the wife, if he wants it, she can't say no.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's, you give into your...
Let that sit there.
Yeah. It's not about her needs, as it's about his. Yeah. It's also messed up.
Well, yeah. We're the men. How else are we supposed to think?
And if we're not giving it to you, then I guess you're in your rights to go and get it elsewhere. I think some take it to that extent as well.
Yep, pretty sure that's in my interpretation. Yeah. Okay, so then you end up leaving this terribly toxic place that we've determined is a cult, because what else can you call it?
Yeah.
So then you join the other church there, you have some positive experiences, go through Providence, and then so you start deconstructing, and now you are a self-proclaimed atheist. How was that? Because now you lost connection to your family, or to your friend group, from the old thing.
Yeah.
Have you built any of those relationships back? The fact that you're not religious anymore, does that make it even harder? Kind of what's the deal now?
What do you mean, the restoration?
Yeah.
I'm the devil, essentially. I have reconnected with a few people. I've been a little bit surprised because it was 20 years of not talking to anybody. If they saw me, they would glare at me, that kind of thing. So I've rebuilt a few connections. I think maybe they realized I wasn't quite as devilish as they've been told I was. But otherwise, yeah, not really. A lot of my friendships that I now have are friendships that I built at Providence and in the years since.
Oh, yeah.
So even coming out as an atheist after being in something like Providence College isn't exactly a walk in the park. And I did lose some friends over that. People were very upset. I was actually surprised at the people who were accepting versus who was not. But yeah, it was an interesting split.
Yeah. Right.
But a lot of our friends were along the same line, also asking questions. A lot of them are still Christians, but very left-wing Christians. So it's, yeah.
I won't lie to you. If my former sect thought I was the devil, I'd spend a lot of money learning magic tricks, like with my hands. Some flash paper, making fire and shit appear. Like, this is what happens when you leave. It's awesome.
You just drop a smoke bomb.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. They wouldn't know what to do with that. I've heard of one service, I think it was about a year ago, they talked about those of us who left in the split, and we are demons with horns. So, yeah.
Look at that,
I don't see any horns. No.
And I was actually I was talking to some of the people who were in the church at that point when that sermon came, like, so there you go. I did know that you guys thought I was the devil. Literally called us demons.
Yeah. You're just like Hellboy grinding your horns down every day just to keep them hidden. Randy, did you ever have any, I mean, growing up not religious, did you have any interest in trying something out to go through churches and see what's what?
Not really, no. Like we in elementary school, we used to have, I remember it was usually once a week someone would come in and do like, I guess like a Bible study kind of thing where they'd come into the classroom, they'd read a story, have the little Velcro stickers on the felt board. And like, it never appealed to me. I didn't get it. I was like, well, why do people just believe this book just because it's written in a book? Like, I never connected with, because I was a big believer in like science already at that point, like dinosaurs and evolution. I just never really had, like, my family's spiritual, like we're Catholic, through my grandparents and stuff, but we were just never, they always believed in a God per se, but not organized religion. It was always just, hey, if you want to go, if you want to believe, go ahead, but this is what we think, and if you don't think that way, that's fine. So I never really had an interest in going to check it out because the services seemed long and boring. I'm not going to lie. I was a kid. I didn't care. And I wasn't interested. It just didn't grab me. Like I hear stories about the Ark and Noah and Moses parting the seas. And I'm like, well, that's cool. But like, you're going to tell me that you think that's real? I don't know. It's, I don't know. I never had the urge to go.
I think it has to be brain.
The Noah's Ark, a children's story. It's not a children's story.
Mm-hmm.
You kill everybody on Earth. It's not a children's story.
But they make toys with the animals and this cute little boat.
No matter how you draw the animals and make them as cartoony as you like, you're murdering millions of people.
Yeah.
But they asked for it. They had it coming. Noah gave them the chance to come on the boat. That's so much of this, though. People, I mean, it's all part of the slut shaming too. You were asking to be raped, and so same with all these people. They had a chance to get saved. God was calling them, and they didn't. So whatever happens to them, whatever, that's fine.
But honestly, if say you were in, that's an interesting thought that just popped into my head. So say you were still in the middle of say you're 15 years old and you're well in the thick of it, dealing with what you're dealing with, and some guy starts building a giant boat, south of Sardo, just in the middle of whatever. There's not a lake to be found, and there's no reason. But if the church leaders were to tell you, we need to get on this boat because the world's going to flood, do you think you would have and not asked questions? Yeah.
I would have probably wondered, but I mean, if you look at what the people are doing now, the stuff that they so completely believe they're leaders. I mean, they believe that the millions are about to start flowing in any minute now. It's the same kind of ludicrous. So they really, and they think the world is, so what is going to happen is that the millions are going to flow in and then the world ends. So the world is ending in our lifetime, according to them now. That's come out. So, I mean, it's as ludicrous, essentially, as building a boat and saying there's going to be a flood. But the scripture says your leader, who is essentially God in the flesh, says, so it's a weird concept. But I mean, God did create miracles before Noah and the flood did happen. So, sure. I think a lot of these people, well, yes, but according to them, it's real. But I think a lot of these people are asking questions because there's also a lot of pressure right now to give all your money over. And I've heard that one of their latest tactics is if you have less than 50% equity in your house, you need to sell your house because the bank is going to take your house from you otherwise. So sell your house, take the money that you get out of it, lay it at the apostles' feet. Because remember, the world is ending any minute now. And we need to have the money to bring in the multitudes. We need somewhere to bring them to. And so when they're here, so you don't need to be living in comfort. You don't need to be planning for retirement. You don't need to be doing any of this. The world is almost over. So it's really the same thing as Noah and the Ark. It's really not that far removed.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
super fun.
And I don't understand how the people aren't asking questions. And I think they have to be, but there's also this fear of asking questions, because if you ask questions, then you're sinning and you're going to go to hell. And even if you want to leave, you're leaving your support groups, you're leaving your community. And remember, the world is dark and evil, and you're never going to be happy out here. There's just so much disincentive to leave that for anybody to leave is a huge act of courage. It's
right.
Again, it's just to reiterate, that's basically just a toxic relationship.
Yep.
We've all heard stories of women being abused by their wives, or vice versa, even, that you come to believe that you deserve it based on the messaging you're being told. And so then for you to leave, that's almost impossible. Or if they do leave, sometimes they get back together with the prick that's been beating them, because that's all they know. And they think how it should be.
And on this line, that's exactly what's happening. And I've talked to quite a few people lately who have finally left, and they said it took them 2 to 3 years from the time they first wanted to leave until they finally got out. So they might have made the exit, they got pulled back in, because there is that heavy pull to get people back in, and they tell you you'll never be happy, and you're still so weak and you don't know what to do, so you go back. And so you just struggle for those years until you finally get enough courage to walk out. So it's exactly the same as that abusive partner. You go back to him, and then he beats you again, because now why is he bothering to hide anything? And so it's now you have to build the courage to actually take the step away and to not let him chase you anymore, to get that protective order, to whatever. It's exactly the same.
So then, so now we'll move on from that darkness. So then you get your degree at Providence, and so now you're living in Winnipeg, not having much contact with them. How was the process for you of de-Christianizing or de-religiousizing or whatever, deconstructing?
That was the final process. Well, if I look at what I was at Prov, so I said I stopped asking questions because I knew if I kept on picking at this, it would all fall apart. So once I look back, because then I said, well, then I saw God for who he was. He was loving, he was kind, he was caring, compassionate. I was pro-LGBTQ at that point. Looking back, I was basically a Christian agnostic. I said I believed because it was a comfortable thing. I couldn't afford to lose my community at that point. All my friends, everybody I knew was Christian, and it was just something I couldn't handle. So then my husband and I got married, and we got married in an evangelical church in Steinbach, and we were attending Anglican services at that point as well. And so we kind of formed it after an Anglican service. So we were moving further and further left, as even by the time we got married. And I think it was a year or two into our getting married. And I'd always been comfortable with questions. I was just leaving them on the back burner, because I knew that once I picked them up and started looking at them again, that would be the end. And I just wasn't ready for that. And I think that was around when Bill Maher's Religulous came out. So I was watching it. And I mean, the questions about it, I'm like, sure, because I wasn't really holding on to the infallibility of the faith. My husband still did believe, and he had worked really hard to make the creationism versus evolution. He had worked really hard to make that make sense. He's more scientific minded. And so he was watching some of this movie, and he just got up. He was so agitated. He walked away because it was just poking holes into those things. And so that kind of started it for him. He started digging and asking questions, and really asking hard ones. And so we were kind of doing it beside each other at that point, and I think that's what triggered my questions again. So we both kind of deconstructed side by side. I did my last few questions, and I had a hard time with it, and because emotionally I still really like the faith, and I still like hymns. I still love singing the hymns and that kind of thing. That's a big part of but yeah, so I started asking those questions. I'm like, all right, God, this is your chance. If you're real, if you exist, this is the time to show yourself to me somehow, anyhow. I don't care how, but please show me that you exist. Like, I'm right on the edge here. I need some incentive. And it was like the heavens were led. There was nothing. And I begged him over and over, like, seriously, this is it. I need something. And there was nothing. And then I just kind of felt the last bit of a crumble out of my fingers, and that was done.
It's a weird thing. And I think it's important that we acknowledge how difficult it is, because if it's your whole life and if it's everything, because I was always kind of on the edge, but I think for a long time, again, I was a believer. So then to go from that's like believing in anything when you firmly are in it, to then go out of it, like that's a difficult thing. I think it's important that we acknowledge that it's not just like, oh, I don't believe anymore.
No, definitely not. But people like to say it's because of my experience in the cult that I'm angry at God, and that's why I left. I'm like, no.
But even if that were the case, that's understandable.
Definitely it would be, but it isn't. And I don't like being categorized as just being angry and bitter. That's not. I wanted to hold on to my faith, and it was a hard thing to let go. Sure. Yeah, it was. And I remember being afraid, because you always hear this messaging that a marriage can only be healthy when you've got God in there with you, like the cord of three strands and that kind of thing. And so your marriage will not be as good if you don't have God, if you don't have prayer. Your life will fall apart. That's all the messaging. And so I still had that little bit of fear. Like, what if my life does fall apart? What if things go bad now? But the only way I could only be honest with myself. And I remember thinking, if God does exist, he knows that I have been looking for the truth. He knows that I want to do the right thing. He knows how hard I look to find answers. So if he's there, he can show himself to me. He can bring me back. If he can prove without a doubt he's there, I'll absolutely come back. But I have to follow my conscience.
For sure. I used to spend time in church sitting there, because, again, I would daydream because I was bored. It's not compelling enough. The way that they presented any of these ideas were never compelling enough for me to really pay attention. So I would either play on my iPod. I'd have like one earbud up and just sort of sit there and play a game, or I'd fall asleep, or I'd doodle on the envelopes, or I vividly remember daydreaming, sitting there, imagining that if I suddenly got like magical powers, I would then go up to heaven and confirm whether there's a God or not. Because I would always be like, it would be so much easier if we just knew. I'd be like, why? If you're God, why wouldn't you just make it clear? And again, the very religious will say, well, the sunrise makes it clear. The mountains makes it clear. The breathing makes it clear. Blah, 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 blah. Even though that isn't true. But it's just, why wouldn't you clearly define it? If you're this all-powerful thing, why would you leave it up for humans to interpret whatever they want? Why would you then just show up one day, all of a sudden be like, you just send like a mental message to all the Christians and say, everybody stand outside at 9 a.m., tomorrow, and I'm just going to appear and just like do a little dance and then go away. And then everybody knows. Right? Like, it's easy. So I remember being a teenager and thinking, it'd be so nice to just know. And then I could go on with my life, one way or the other. And it just, once I got over that, and then I was probably 22-ish. I almost remember the day. I don't remember the date, but I kind of remember roughly kind of the day that it's sort of like, I kind of sloughed it off. I'm just like, you know what? I think I'm an atheist. But once I said it, that's when like the glass shattered. I'm like, okay, it's done. It's gone. And the weight just lifts. There's all the guilt. And I personally don't think I'm that terrible of a person since then. Maybe I'm wrong. But like, I frankly don't. I of course, some benefit can be given, or some credit can be given to the lessons that I learned, perhaps through Judeo-Christian ethos, all that type stuff. So maybe that's why I'm not a terrible person. But who was it that said? I think it was Ricky Gervais. He had said something like, "Oh no, there was Penn Jillette. He had said something like, he's like, I could rape and murder. I rape and murder and do as much drugs as much as I want to do, which is zero.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't
Well,
need
it always
religion to tell me
disturbs
not
me.
to do it.
It always disturbs me when Christians say, if it wasn't for God, I would be out there raping and murdering people. It's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I have zero desire to do that ever. So.
Exactly. Whether or not and again, Randy grew up without that. I mean, how often do you feel like murdering and raping, Randy?
At least every other day. No, like it just, to me, like it's wild to hear that some people are like that, right? Like, just, I think being a good person is either like you're a good person or you're not. It's kind of it's not really like a godly thing. It's just kind of, if it's in you, it's in you. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's hard, listening to you guys having to struggle with stuff like that. And I'm like, I never had an issue with any of that. So to me, it hits me, I feel terrible that people have to go through that kind of struggle and sit on heavy topics like that, when like you could just go through life and not have to feel bad about every single thing you do.
You could just
I wasn't a godly person, but I can decipher right from wrong. It's not like it's a hard thing to do, right?
Well, I'm kind of jealous of my kids because they get to just live their life and just be who they are without all this kind of fear of hell around the corner. I
was going to ask you actually how that, because you said you had how many kids?
2 kids, a 7 and a 4-year-old.
2 kids. Yeah, so I was going to say, how does that work? Because again, there was a friend of mine. His dad was a Catholic, and I think his dad was a Catholic and his mom was a Mennonite or something. And when I was growing up, that was just mind blowing to me. I'm like, how are they not the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm a prophet because they ended up getting divorced, but I don't know why. But it's just interesting to me especially when it's different religious sects, how you then raise the kids, or especially if you're atheist or if you whatever. So maybe how are you going about that?
Well, we've got some minimal exposure to religion, obviously. I mean, they hear about God from school, or people, I think there's one religious club that comes, and so there's little influences, and especially around Christmas, she'll ask about baby Jesus, and so we both try to kind of play it off as, well, that's what some people believe, and there's stories about that, but we believe this. So we're trying to kind of hold it loosely. I'd like to expose them more to different religions as they grow older, just that they're aware. I kind of almost see it as a vaccination of sorts. If they're exposed to religion, because you hear these stories of kids who had nothing, who never learned anything, and then they get exposed to fundamentalist religion and go whole hog. It's probably a personality thing too, but I figure if I expose them and let them learn about these different things and just kind of hold it with an open hand, it's what some people believe. You can believe what you want, and teaching them critical thinking above all.
Which is precisely how my parents were, and I think that's what helped me. Some people believe this thing, and if you want to go learn about it, go ahead, by all means. We're not going to stop you. We're not going to hide it from you. And I think that really helped me inform myself going forward in terms of religion and all that kind of stuff.
That's good. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think they should add more of that to the school curriculum. The fact that you can then look, well, first of all, critical thinking.
Yeah.
But also, like, just in general, just looking at all the different religions. And I think there's a little bit, some of it, maybe, depending on the teacher. But frankly, it should be mandatory. But again, I've seen people get real mad when they hear about these stories go viral about teachers asking students. There was once I heard a professor or whatever asked his students, or a teacher asked his students, to write an essay from the perspective of I think it's the perspective of someone who believes in Allah, like as if you're into Islam, right, from their perspective. And I forget kind of what the details were, but then all the commentary was like, how dare they? Because the parents got mad and they're like, oh, you're indoctrinating them, you're trying to convert them to Islam, blah 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 blah. Like,
these are the parents that want their kids to learn about Christianity.
Yeah, same thing.
I mean, if you're fighting so hard to bring prayer back into school, well, let's talk about all the different kinds of prayers. Let's bring different religious prayers in and expose kids to all of them. But no, it has to always be Christianity.
Of course not. That's the anyway. Okay, so then We should probably stop talking eventually, even though I find your life very interesting, and I think we can relate in many ways. But yeah, actually, before we shut her down, since your dad was a pastor and also helped found this chapter, are your parents still involved in that? Are they still religious? Kind of, what's your relationship left with your parents?
We still have a relationship with them. They're not religious at this point at all anymore. And yeah, they're really good grandparents to the kids. The kids go out there and visit them frequently and that kind of thing. Yeah. So we're more or less on the same page now as far as all of that goes.
That's interesting. That's interesting because normally when the longer someone's in something, the more they double down.
Yeah,
So
it was a bit of that in the beginning, but yeah, I think it's been over 20. It's been 21 years now, so yeah.
Yeah. The world hasn't ended yet.
No.
We'll see.
Exactly.
Right, folks should definitely check out your article on Mennotoba.com. That's like Manitoba, but from Mennonites. It was really interesting. Definitely check them out. Is there anything you want to plug? I don't know if you have any websites, projects, writings, anything you want people to know about?
Not really at this point. I am starting to look at writing a book. That's probably going to be a process that takes a little while, but
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah. I think Well, I didn't expect the Manitoba article to go that viral. I thought maybe a few hundred people in Quebec would read it, but last count was it around 40,000 hits. I don't know what it is since then, but
excellent.
It went a little bit
viral. It's
viral.
because so many people around here want to distance themselves from the quote crazies.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm a Christian, that kind of Christian, or I'm a this, but I'm not a that. Like, I think that's why I shared that article on my Facebook and a couple people commented, and I know they hold some very interesting conservative religious views, but they're like, whoa, that's so sad. I'm like,
It's the extreme.
Yeah.
That was, it's kind of appealed to the wide, from conservative Christians to atheists. It's just, it's that extra that aspect of crazy that I think really, and it's not just been here, it's been in Elmer that has gone viral. And I think it's also been around the world where they have exposure. And so people have just been fascinated by that counter view. Because there's also a video called, Who is Henry Hildebrandt, I think?
Oh, yeah.
And that one is a fascinating one because that gives you some of their sermons and some of the crazy things they've said. And that one was also over 43,000 views now, I think, the last I checked. So there's a lot of exposure. And again, they always thought this exposure would be positive and that they would have a lot of attention. Now people will start coming in, but that's not really how it's shaping up.
Come on. All publicity is good publicity.
That's right.
Yeah, it's except not this. I think they're trying to change it. They're trying to persuade people that this is all taken out of context. And also, I'm a disgruntled ex-member who is exaggerating and lying. That's what they say about all ex-members that speak against them. But,
of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also what Harvey Weinstein says about all the people, all the allegations.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people know better, but I can see that they might get a few followers out of this, maybe, but it's definitely not going to be the multitudes that they're hoping. So it's
someone that's just tired of buying new clothes all the time, so they can their burlap sack.
It's just easier this way.
Yeah. Well, and a simpler, plainer life where you are told what you do and you don't have to think. I mean,
I can understand the allure of that. I get it. If you just
if you're tired of making decisions, just to have somebody make them for you, sure.
I'm in. All right, Randy. This is now the Church of God Restoration podcast.
Sounds good. I'm gonna have some learning to do, I guess.
We do pretty well. We're two young white guys. I think we do all right in the Church of Restoration.
It could be. I've had friends who've gone to visit and they've used the language actually and said those things, and they are like, "Oh, we can feel that you are a blood-washed brother. We can feel that you are one of us."
A blood-washed brother? Is that what you said?
Washed by the blood of the Lamb, so you are one of us. You belong to us. And it's like, you don't realize I was just staying at Gloria's house, or I'm one of Gloria's friends, do you?
Blood-washed brother. Oh, that is a disgusting term. Okay, well,
awful.
This was quite the chat. We don't discuss religion a lot on the show, but when we do, I tend to ramble, so I apologize to anybody listening. It's always a treat. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you and your kids, your husband, everybody's doing well and moving forward and getting whatever therapy and counseling you may
Oh
need.
yeah, I've done a lot of therapy. Yeah, no, we've got a really good life now. I'm happy where things ended up.
That's good.
Excellent.
So hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It was fun.
You bet. No, shout out to Janice Bergen
awesome.
for connecting us. She's delightful.
For sure.
And also the Eastman Humanist. What are they? The Eastman Humanist Society or group?
Yeah,
or community or something.
Association. I forget exactly, but yeah, Eastman
Whatever
Humanist.
they're called. we had 2 of them on, I don't know, a year ago or something. And, I still don't remember what their organization is called. But shout out to them if you're interested in a community that isn't necessarily focused on a deity. That's maybe what might be worth checking out for you.
Yeah, they're a great group of people.
Indeed. All right. Well, thanks, Gloria. We'll be in touch.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Randy. How you feeling?
That's fun, man. What a chat. What a chat. I learned that I'm glad that I didn't grow up super religious.
Well, I think that was never in doubt. But
yeah, but no, man, it's some heavy stuff. I hate that. I hate the fact that there's people that have to go through that because of certain groups, and I hope that we can get better moving forward. But for some reason, I kind of doubt that's going to happen.
Well, I think within the religious world, a lot of the churches in and around Steinbach in particular are very they're not progressive politically, but they're more progressive religiously, I think.
Right.
But whether or not that's better or worse remains to be seen. But there's a lot less spanking going around and a lot less overt culty stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not true. There's a certain church in town that is very culty, but
they who shall not be named.
Yeah, we'll hopefully get a little bit more insight into that eventually. But yeah, I think it's important that we show that if you're into it, all the power to you. Like if you're finding a healthy community, again, all the power to you. I love it. Like it's great. Yeah. That's fantastic. But the problem is there's too many instances where that doesn't exist and where people are abused and where people are taken advantage of and manipulated and
Yeah, as soon as it becomes detrimental to other people and to yourself, that's when it's it's time to figure some stuff out.
True that. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. Thanks again to Gloria for joining us. Like we said, check out the Mennotoba article. It was a heater.
Heater.
Yeah. Get in there.
Check it out.
Check my out, yo. Go check out the article and read it.
Well, Reg.
So let's throw a little plugs here. So
sure.
She didn't promote anything there, but let's promote. We're on Instagram at 2 Idiots Podcast. We are on Facebook, 2 Idiots Podcast. On Twitter, 2 Idiots Show, and on YouTube, which you may or may not already be watching this. We are 2 Idiots Podcast. Go subscribe. If you're listening to this, even if you don't plan on watching a lot of it, give us a subscription. Everybody
For sure.
has a YouTube. Don't lie to me. Go subscribe. Let's just get the numbers up a little bit.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Help us get out there a little more. If you're also looking to get in touch with us, go to doubleidiotspodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on patreon.com/2idiotspodcast.
Word. We have a whole bunch of I don't know why I said that. Word.
Word.
So definitely check it out. We have different tiers, $3, $5, $7, $10 a month to help support the show, help us upgrade our equipment. We have a new camera for Randy.
Yes, it's coming
in a few months. So we haven't gotten it set up. So we're trying to upgrade our mics eventually, get everything better for you. And if you go on the patreon.com/2idiotspodcast, at the $7 tier and above, you are a part of our Idiot Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
Bam. So yeah, basically, the members in the Idiot Hall of Fame get a special shout out every week of the show as a way of saying thank you. A special thank you to these people in particular.
Indeed, they do. First up, we have Mr. Mitchell Buckers.
Buck Pierce Buckers.
Man, throw a football over them mountains.
We need to. I'll do it after. We have a little thing from Mitch that we need to include.
Sure.
But after Mitch, we have Mr. Brian Moore.
Thank you, Brian, for your loyal patronage. Next up, we have Mr. Drew McDonald, fan and friend of the show.
Old McDonald had a Drew. Yeah.
Oh boy.
And after Drew, we have Miss Kayla Lundberg on behalf of her and her significant other, Mr. Jordan Peters. Thank you, folks, for supporting the show.
Much appreciated. And last but not least, my darling mother, the original patron, Danny Dewick.
The OG.
The OG. The one that kicked off this craze we call Patreon-age to us.
But yeah, so basically, if you go to Patreon, you can hook us up. You'll get a bunch of benefits. You get a bunch of perks. You get shout outs. Every comment you write on our Patreon will include in an episode. There's basically no end to the
No, you get exclusive Patreon exclusive episodes that the public don't get to hear. So that's always a good time. That's always special to do. You can put out topics that you'd like us to talk about, which then go to a vote on what those exclusive episodes will be. And we also have quarterly merch draws. There's all kinds of stuff in there for you.
Exactly. So I'm just trying to quickly find a clip here. I can't switch the properly, so I'll go this way. Go to our loyal listener, Mr. Mitchell Buckers, sent us a little something. So I wanted to quickly get that in here. The guy makes some music. He's represented by here it is. Let's read his blurb here real quick. He signed with a label in Neepawa, Manitoba, Frozen Fire Studios. Check them out. Check out Mitch. He wrote us here. I'll play this little clip. So
sure.
Comes in.
Hey, this is Mitch. I'm a blues country artist signed with Frozen Fire Studios, based out of Neepawa, Manitoba. I just wanted to let you guys know that you're doing a great job, and I've really enjoyed your episode so far, and look forward to more. Have a good one.
Thanks, Mitch.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Mitchell Buckers. So yeah, so basically, if you want to send us something, we'll include it in an episode because we're cool like that.
Yeah.
You want to be a part of what makes this engine run, tick? No, you don't want an engine to tick. If you make the clock to tick, you want
yeah. keep this perpetual engine running.
Yeah, perpetual motion squad. Never forget.
There you go.
But yeah, so thanks, Mitch, for that. Definitely check him out. He's apparently on TikTok, which neither Randy or I are busy on, but you could check out Mitchell Patrick Bukarz on TikTok or Frozen Fire Studios there as well. We'll give him a little plug. Go check it out.
There you go. Check him out.
You check it out.
Yo, should we get out of here, Reg? Is it about time?
Yes. We're gonna go record a Patreon exclusive episode for those of you that get that. On a special tier, you get an extra episode.
Oh boy. Get up on the Patreon. Yep. Get on there. Patreon.com/2idiots-podcast.
Hit it up and get yourself some merch like Randy's beautiful shirt there. Teespring.com/stores/2-idiots-podcast. Get yourself some. We're running too long. Hour and 40 minutes. This one's a heavy one. But I hope
heavy boy. Bye.
Heavy. Okay. See you later, folks.